Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to show you how I've painted up some minis that I've wanted to do for nearly 20 years. It was when Dawn of War Winter Assault came out. I was playing around with the army painting thing on it, and there was this Imperial Guard regiment called the Harakoni Warhawks, and I just thought, it's a super cool name. I dug into them. They've been around for a long time, but there's not heaps of background on them. And yeah, essentially, they were this airborne, launched from Valkyries, all this super cool stuff. And I've never really been able to realise it. I've never really had the opportunity to have a go at them. But when Games Workshop sent through the new Kill Team box, contained these new plastic Tempestus Aquilons, the new Scions with the grav shoots, and it was like, this is too good an opportunity, right? So I picked up a box of Kazakin, got the other kit, got the Aquilons kit, chucked them together. So this video is as much about me just realising that sort of hobby bucket list dream project. I'm sure there will be far more efficient ways to do everything I'm doing in this video, but I've really enjoyed it. I hope you do too. Let's paint. So a little bit of the building sort of kit bashing process. I thought I'd chuck in a few parts that I found sort of notable when I was doing the kit bash. Firstly, on the backpack, needed to trim off these little tabs at the bottom of them to help them fit properly. My original plan was to try and turn the Scions into some Inquisitorial Stormtroopers. Unfortunately, that's proved a slightly more involved project than I had hoped for, due to the way that the miniatures go together, some of the pieces. So hopefully that's something I will cover in the future. I've started them. But I want to do a good job on them because, again, it's another kind of bucket list project for me to do a squad of stormtroopers. But as you can see, the backpack fits on lovely once you do that. Unfortunately, there's this little pipe that goes over the shoulder on the Kazakin kit, which connects to the backpack you get with that, and it leaves a couple of mil gap to the backpack when you use the grav chute. So the way I figured to sort this out was trim it off where the sort of wider knobbly bit is. You just get a nice clean cut down there, and then I'm just going to flip it so that little sort of port, I guess, where it plugs into the backpack is now vertical. So it just kind of looks like, I don't know, some generic aerial type thing. I was really keen to not make them look like Kazakin. They're carapace armored drop troops, and what's fun with this, doing the kill team, I'm getting the opportunity to create sort of a hardened veterans squad of Harakoni Warhawks, so it's giving me a little bit more leeway. But I really wanted to try and take them away from the Kazakin kit and the Tempestus Scions kit, for Aquilons kit for that matter. I've just used a little bit of extra thin plastic glue here because there's tiny pieces, they don't need a huge amount of hold. And obviously, rather than using a big blob of sort of thicker plastic cement, using the extra thin just means there's no excess anywhere, and it just does enough to bond them together. And I think makes it look like it was meant to be like that. So, as I said, this is very much a gaming project. I'm really enjoying Kill Team. My little gaming group are into it as well. It fits my sort of lifestyle at the minute. These smaller skirmish type games, and yeah, I wanted something I could use for it, so I was trying to combine that with wanting to get this project done on the channel. One of the biggest, I guess, hurdles to when it comes to bashing the two kits together, the arms on the Scions, where the shoulder joint comes, they recess slightly into the torso on the Scions model, whereas the join on the Kazakin is just a flat join. So you need to trim off this extra bit that would normally sit inside the sort of shoulder area on the Scions model. It's not tricky or anything like that. It's just you will need to do it, and consequently, that does change the positions of the arms on the body, and it can change some of the distances. And the way that a lot of the modern GW kits are put together now, you often have the weapon on the one arm, and then the other arm's got to attach to it. So, for instance, on here, because if I'd done that trimming, one of these little frag grenades was in the way, so I just needed to clip that off and clean that area. Very, very simple, particularly the way the models are sculpted. It seems like you can clip off these extra bits, and it's almost like the area's there beneath them to clean up, if that makes sense. So what wasn't difficult at all. And again, to help take it further from the Kazakin kit, I didn't want to use any of the Kazakin heads. I just went back to my sort of bits box of Imperial Guard heads from the relatively recent, or their last big release, and was going to use the heads from there. Shaved off the little, I know it's not the Cadia symbol, but that symbol that they've got on the helmets, again, just to help differentiate them from where the heads came from originally. And I will use the rebreather heads from those kits rather than the Kazakin ones, so just to try and keep them separate. Now, for me, the most important bit to nail on these minis was going to be the tan armor color. They've got tan on the armor color, and then they've got black fatigues underneath. So I was going to put the vast majority of my effort into doing the armor. When I'm army painting, you know, or gaming painting, whatever you want to call it, I like to try and execute everything well, pick one or two areas that I want to stand out. So I don't really want to, neglect any areas, but also I can't take forever on every single area, or else the project, never gets done. And I was looking at the miniature, I was like, what shall I airbrush? Should I do the armor? Should I do the fatigues? Actually, in the end, the airbrushes wasn't the right tool for this job for me, with how I wanted to paint. I really wanted to get tons and tons of texture into the armor. And the easiest way to do that was to paint it on. So you can see here I'm using a very heavily diluted Steel Legion Drab colour, this sort of brown colour. And I am really sort of roughly stippling it on to the armour. Because the paint is nice and thin, it's not leaving any physical texture on the miniature. But what it allows me to do is just create all these sort of scratches and dashes over the miniature. And then I slowly start adding in Karak Stone to that mix. Now, I'm using a large, stubby sort of brush here. They're called miniature brushes. This is a Series M by Artis Opus, but it's miniature brushes, the type you're looking for. It's nothing to do with painting models like ours, but they just tend to be shorter, stubbier brushes, and they're ideal for doing sort of stippling and things like that with. And early on in this process, I'm really not worrying about how particularly accurate it is. I know I'm going to be covering the rest with black when I do the cloth underneath, so it's fabric underneath, so that's not a problem. So I can use just a great big brush like this and just start to create that lovely sort of warm texture on the miniature. And with regards to sort of lighting and stuff like that, I'm really not stressing about it too much, sort of lighter towards the top a bit. But I'm very much ignoring all of the panel lines, all the recesses and things like that at this stage. I'm just sort of lighting sorry, it's not my war cup then. Just focusing in on the larger areas. At this point, where we're almost up to pure Karak Stone, I'm starting to be a little bit more deliberate with where I'm placing the light. So, I'm picturing where is it going to shine down and highlight the most on his armor. And here I'm just going in again and just drawing loads and loads of tiny little dashes, dots and scratches over the mini. I really, really enjoy painting like this, and usually I only get to paint on a very small area of a model like this. So it was lovely being able to do a larger bit on the mini. I've chosen to work on this squad in sort of small batches, just so I can give the minis that little bit more extra time. Not loads of extra time, but I've only got to have 10 of them for the game. So rather than batch out all 10 together, build 3 that I really, really like the look of, paint them, get excited, do the next 3. I've got everything built at this stage, and the next 3 are already on the go. So I'll make sure to post some pics of those. Hopefully we'll have some games in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, I'm just working my way all the way through almost to pure Karak Stone. So you can see the difference there once we go in and add that next layer of the mix. It may not look much when you're doing it, but it's certainly the second time you apply that mix, it really does pump it up. And now we are going with the pure Karak Stone, and you see I've switched to a brush with a finer point, your sort of traditional paint brush. This is a Series S by AO. And here I'm sort of deliberately painting every single sort of scritch and scratch that I'm doing on there. Not doing any sort of edge highlighting like that at this stage, but I am, being a lot more deliberate with where I'm placing them all. And yeah, at this stage, I was like, yes, I'd done one test model before this, and it was good enough that I thought this was worth pursuing. But I'm glad I changed it slightly from the test model. I left more of the black showing through on this than I did on the test mini, and it gave me a much better, much more sort of dramatic look, I think, to the armor by doing it that way. As I say, I'm still pretty much ignoring any recesses because I'm going to go in and do some pin washing and stuff anyway to bring those out. At this point, the blue tack had been too covered in primer, wasn't sticking anymore. Always annoying, and particularly when you're doing a technique like this where you're sort of hammering the mini, you can move it off if you're going to use miniature holders like the corks, like I do a lot of the time. And particularly up, on the helmet, just making sure I'm getting it right. And here you can see the difference. So on the left, we've got the pure Karak layer added, and on the right, we've still only got a couple of layers of the mix on it. But yeah, just really, really good fun. Not particularly time consuming. I don't know, 10 minutes or so for the Mini, something like that. Not a lot. Certainly not to the point where it's not an achievable gaming paint job. Now I want to go in and do a little bit of oil washing here. So I'm using raw umber. This is a colour by Winsor Newton, and this is their artist oil colour range. So it's a really decent brand of oil paint. And I'm thinning it down just using normal mineral spirits, or white spirits we call them over here. And you can see the consistency I've mixed it up to is a little bit thicker than something like your Agrax Earthshade. And I'm going to apply this all over the miniature. If I was working on this on my own, I'd be using something like Sansador, which is an odorless artist grade thinner. But when I do film for the videos, I use normal white spirits simply because it evaporates quicker, it dries quicker, it allows me to film more efficiently, but it stinks. So I much prefer to use the good odorless stuff. And you can see here, I'm applying the wash all over the miniature. I'm not just pin washing in. You don't need to varnish or anything like that. As long as the paint's dry underneath it, you're not going to have any reactions at all. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to those of you that support us over on Patreon. Over on Patreon, you get another video each week, often by Andy, and it's usually on a more in-depth or sort of high-level piece. He's recently done a 4-part, 2-3 hour series on his Golden Demon entry that he's just done, this awesome Wood Elf Healer model. So yeah, if you'd like to get that, as well as exclusive podcast stuff and supports over here as well, it makes a huge difference. Well, it allows us to do this, so we're hugely grateful for it. And if for any reason you can't support us over there, then your likes, your subscribes, your shares, your comments, all of the usual stuff that everyone says on YouTube videos, it really does make a difference, and I appreciate all of that. The reason I am washing the oil all over the armour is because I don't just want to darken the recesses or change the colour in the recesses. I want to slightly tint the whole armour, just to make it a little bit sort of warmer with that brown on there than I had already. But you see, I'm not just slopping it on, I'm being quite deliberate where I'm placing it, and if I get a big build up, I'm wicking that off with the brush, just moving it around until everything's got a nice coat. Now I've left that about, I don't know, 15 minutes, something like that. The most raised areas are pretty much completely dry, but the recesses are still maybe a little bit wet. And all I'm doing at this stage is going in with some clean mineral spirits and my brush and just cleaning up a few of the highest point areas on the miniature where perhaps I don't want that filter layer over the armour so much, just to help add a little bit of contrast with your light and your dark on the Mini. You know, we're talking 30 seconds, you know, per miniature to clean this up with. And you could do this with Q-tips and all the rest of it, but you don't need to. Like when you're doing it like this, you can just use your brush. And as I say, don't worry about varnishing your oil paints, the mineral spirits. It's not going to interact with the paint that's underneath as long as that acrylic paint is dry. So once that had completely dried, so perhaps another 10, 15 minutes, if that, just get a hairdryer on it, it's usually what I do. I just went in and just targeted certain areas with another bit of the oil wash. So just any recesses that I wanted to make that little bit darker, I'm just going in here. So exactly the same mix, exactly the same consistency. I'm just going in. But you can see actually, because we've got that layer of dry oil paint on there, that capillary action isn't as effective. It's not sucking it into the recesses quite as well. So it's important to be a little bit more deliberate. A decent point on your brush will really help. And I think it's looking really, really cool at this stage. You may just leave it here. I want to take it to how it looks on the right here. And this is a relatively time-consuming step, probably the most time-consuming step of the entire paint job. But as I said, for me, this armour was the most important bit of the Mini. And the reason I wanted to go a step further was I just wanted to add a little bit more definition to the miniature. So I'm just going back in with my pure Karak Stone. Now this oil has dried overnight, but I haven't got anything else over it. There's no varnish or anything like that. It's completely dry, so I can just paint straight over the top of it with my acrylics. And here I'm going to go in and I am going to work the edges a lot more. I'm not properly edge highlighting, as it were. I'm not doing every single edge, but what I am going is doing in and doing quite a lot of the edges that I think would catch the light. I'm doing edges where two panels meet, and I want to create that little bit of separation, that little bit of definition between them. But I'm also going in and just adding a few more scritches and scratches on the higher areas. It's a little bit tricky at this stage because you want the paint a touch thicker than before, so you can do the edge highlights nicely. But also, if you want to add these extra scratches in, you know, you don't want it too thick because you end up with that nasty blob I got in the first place. But this probably took another 10 to 15 minutes a mini, something like that. So what I would probably do is do this stage on all 3 minis in one hobby session and call it done. Which again is why I like working on them in sort of smaller quantities. But particularly the panels that were down around the thighs and the waist, because of the way in which I painted them, I did feel that they'd lost quite a lot of that definition, and I really wanted to try and address some of the things that I think I do poorly when it comes to painting my gaming stuff. And one of those is making it look really cool under the lamp, and I'm really pleased with it. But then on the table, it all goes a little bit murky. So I'm deliberately trying to push myself here to either do things I haven't done before, or essentially not be lazy, you know, and add an extra step. Now it's time for some of the decals. Now, there's very little information on the Warhawks. So in the end, I went with another drop regiment, the Elysians, the much more famous one. Used to have that amazing range of minis from Forge World. And I'm just going to use that marking idea. So I've got a couple of guard transfer sheets here, the Deathcore one. I thought I'd use the little skulls to represent the veteran symbols. And then I'll just use the insignia and stuff, the numerals off the Cadian ones. I'll link up to a video all about applying your decals. But once they were on, I've just gone back in here and I'm using my Steel Legion and my Karak Stone just to put some scritches and scratches over those decals, just to help weather them into the armour, as it were, into the paint job, so they don't look like they're just stuck on brand new. Again, you know, it's taking 30 seconds or so per mini to do it. And then once they're dry, I've just put a glaze, so a very, very, very thin layer of that paint, the brownie Karak Stone mix, just one glaze over the top, again, just to knock it back and help set it into the paint job. And then for the sergeant, I just copied the Elysian idea of putting a white stripe across his helmet to denote his rank. This I've just done white with a tiny dot of Karak Stone mixed in just to take the edge off, as it were. Relatively thin mix. And as you see, I'm not painting it in one long line. I'm just sort of doing lots of little dabs on it. One, it means that if you mess it up, it doesn't really matter because you don't mess up too large an area. But secondly, you automatically create that sort of weathered, battle damaged look to it. So with all that work done on the armour, I kind of wanted to make sure everything else on the miniature had fewer stages to it, so it's a little bit simpler, simply to do with efficiency. You know, and also, like, you know, again, it's gaming. The armour's what people are going to notice. Everything else I do around it, I wanted to set that armour paint job off. So for the fatigues, I've just painted it black. I use Vallejo, the old Vallejo model colour black. That's because it's a nice, smooth, sort of matte to satin finish black. I really like working with it. And then I've given it one highlight of Eshin Grey. There is a tiny dot of the black in here in the Eshin mix. And that's simply because it was next to it on the wet palette and the black got into it. But I'm very, very broad highlights here. I'm really not worrying too much about, you know, being super accurate or anything like that. Now, for the leather parts, often a mix I really like using at the moment is Thondia or Rhinox hide, and then using Steel Legion Drab as that highlight. But what I didn't want to do was have the colours be too similar with my leather as with my armour. Again, something I'm guilty of, I think, in the past. I end up with this sort of one level of value across the miniature. So I've gone in here, I'm using Thondia again as the base coat, but I'm going to use Mournfang Brown as the highlight colour for it because it's a nice orangey brown, because it's different. And again, normally I would spend a lot more time when I'm painting leather, but I felt that, do you know what, the colour is correct. Apply it nice and neatly, pop on the highlight colour with Mournfang, it's enough, it's done. It's effective enough. Again, it's not drawing the eye away from the armour, it's just helping it out. I wanted to keep as much of the rest of the model kind of dark and black as possible to help, again, show off that tan armour colour. But I did want to use plenty of sort of metal, silver metal on there. I like that look, that sort of utilitarian look. My go-to mix is Iron Warriors by Games Workshop and then Burnt Iron by Metal Colour Series by Vallejo. Very similar colours, they've just got slightly different properties, that's why I mix them together. And then in my ongoing quest to create the ultimate wash to rule them all when it comes to washing silvers, I thought I would try this blend of contrast colours. And then I've watered them down loads, and I apply 2 coats of that to the silver. So I'm bringing in lots of definition, bringing in lots of shading, but it's also knocking the shine way, way back, darkening it right down. And the rest of the metals on there, of which there are very few, just do whatever you like. It really doesn't matter. You know, everyone's got their own go-to little recipes. If you watch our videos, you know I like colours like Decayed Metal that I'm using here by Scale 75. But just whatever sort of colours you like for using, just get some different ones on there. But it's not important for how the model looks at the end, in my opinion. And all of a sudden, we're now at the sort of details stage of the mini. We've got the vast majority of it painted, how we want to paint it. So, having given myself that additional bit of time to paint them, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I need to do something with this chainsword. Let's do hazard stripes. You know, it's Warhammer. Let's have a go. I didn't mention earlier in the video, but I really wanted to try and evoke some of that imperial armour, which is a series of books Forge World used to do. I wanted to try and evoke that vibe. I didn't necessarily want to paint exactly the same as people like Phil Soshinskas and Mark Bedford did in those books, but I wanted to evoke that same kind of feel, but also add in a little bit of something else. I find the easiest way to paint hazards is use an off-white to do the lines, because it covers very well, much better than yellow, and then just glaze yellow over the top. I've chosen this particular contrast one because it's kind of a bit of a murky yellow. It's not too rich. Didn't want it to pull too much attention. There's no easy way, I don't think, of doing these hazards. Like, you just got to have a go. If you muck up, paint them black and go again. I think I actually got pretty good with these, so I'm not too sad. And then I'm going in with my sponge and just scritching them up and really sort of, you know, again, blending them in so that they look as weathered as the armour does on the miniature. I think it's quite important that all the bits on the model sort of make sense next to each other. It's also another reason why you don't have to be super accurate with your hazards. I also, in the end, glazed a little bit of snakebite leather on them, just on the bottom edges, just to add a little bit of transition of colour. Looking at this now on the video, I don't think I needed to do it, but I did, in case you're wondering. And then the faces, we've got, there's barely any skin on these miniatures. We've got a bunch of videos on painting different skin colours. I'll link up to a few in the top, but again, you know, do whatever you fancy. And I had used deliberately, hadn't used rebreather faces on these guys. I wanted to take advantage of the fact that they're the veterans, so there could be a little bit more sort of individuality to them. But I will certainly, for the generic troopers in the kill team, I will just use the rebreather masks on them. So here they are, and I'm starting to think there's only a couple of things left. What do I do? I really, really like how they look at the minute. But as I said, I wanted to push myself. I wanted to force myself to do things a little bit differently. And one of those things is there's a few little lenses or lights on the model. I thought that was quite a good opportunity to try out a little sort of kind of OSL glowy effect thing on them. I've just given them a matte varnish here, and that's simply because there's quite a lot of different paints on there. They've all got slightly different finishes. I wanted to try and unify the finish at this stage, so I've just used Ammo Mig Lucky Varnish. Now, for the goggles, the glasses, I wasn't quite sure what to do, but I'd looked at a few pictures, and blue lenses seemed kind of nice on the goggles. So all I've done here is work my way up through. You've seen there a couple of different blues, working lighter towards the outside edges of the goggles. Yeah, like I say, this is where, for me, like the video, I didn't want it to be a pure tutorial because I'm just trying different things out here, often for the first time. So I don't necessarily want to be like, oh, this is the way you do this, because actually I may discover there's better ways of doing it. This was me trying it for literally the first time, seeing if it worked. But yeah, it's fine. I think the blues work nice, and because I'd kind of at this point committed to adding in some more colours, which again typically I wouldn't do on my minis, I was quite enjoying it. Now I'm just glazing over that contrast blue, a Sherman blue, just to punch the colour up a little bit. And then, as I said, for the actual lenses, there's one of which is left on the right sort of breast area of the mini from the Kazakin kit. I didn't hate this because I kind of felt like it was kind of Spec Opsy enough that I could leave on. And because they've got those scions arms, they've got the little, I don't know what they're called, the gauges and stuff on their van braces to you know, the link up with the fact that it's a drop troop and stuff like that. So I kind of like the idea that this little sort of torch thing on the chest was a point of difference. And here I'm just using exactly what I did in the recent glow video, so I'll link up to that at the top. But I've just used exactly that. And do you know what? I'm looking at them here and I really do like it. Individually, in my hand under the lamp, I hate it because it's not something I've ever really done on my minis. But as soon as I put them a foot away or just put them on the desk and stood up, I was really, really pleased that I'd done it, because it was addressing one of those things that I think, you know, I feel guilty of with a lot of my minis, which is that they can look a bit boring on the table. Just this little dash of colour, which I still feel is in keeping stylistically with the rest of the miniature. So I don't think I've gone overboard with the OSL on there. You know, it's very, very subtle. Just really helped elevate it in my opinion. I'd love to know what you think down in the comments. Actually, I was really undecided, but as the days have gone on, I'm happier and happier with the decision. And it's just good, right, to just force yourself to do some different things. Otherwise, there's, you know, it's just stagnation, right? So there I was just adding a little extra highlight to the metal, say, because that had been dulled down because of that matte varnish. And here I'm just going back in with the oil wash that we used earlier. So I've made a fresh mix up. I'm just applying a few dots of it here and there, maybe over the fatigues, maybe over some of the metal, because it's dirt and grime, right? It would be all over the guardsman anyway. But I think this guy's my favourite. It's kind of got that walking away from the explosion vibe, which I think is pretty cool. And then for the basing, very, very similar to how I did my Solar Auxilia. So if you want to go and check that project out, there's a sort of a full step-by-step of the basing. But these are the two Tamiya colours that I've used. I like this style of basing, this kind of ruined city rubble type basing. I appreciate that it is a very similar colour to the rest of the Mini. I didn't mind that. I don't mind that. I don't think you have to live and die by this idea of light Mini, dark base, and vice versa. I felt the tones were different enough, but also, you know, this is the setting that I picture, you know, my Warhammer 40k stuff occurring in. You know, when I think of Badab, when I think of Gaunt's Ghosts, when I, you know, the Imperial Armour books, Frax, all of that. This is the kind of basing that I like. This is where I picture those you know, that action occurring. And then once that was dry, I grabbed a bunch of pigments. You see here a light grey and then a natural sienna. And I also chose another sienna that had a little bit more of that yellow to it, a little bit more orange actually to it. And that was a deliberate choice to bring in a different tone than I had on the rest of the miniature, just to help differentiate it a little bit. And I'm putting this powder on, you see, very, very sparingly, and then I'm just properly smushing it into the base, because there's loads of texture on that base and there's hardly any powder. This powder isn't going anywhere. I don't need to use any fixed tips or anything like that. There's barely any on there. It's properly worked in. It'll be fine. It's not going to spill on the table or in my carry case or anything like that. It'll be absolutely fine. I did, though, as I was doing it, covered up some areas that were a bit darker. And I thought they looked kind of cool, kind of like scorched bits of rubble or building or whatever. So I just grabbed some black pigment here, and I'm going back in and just adding that sort of charring effect. But yeah, nice and simple, but I think quite effective. And there we go. That's the first 3 done, and I am really, really satisfied with the result we've got in the end with these guys. I achieved everything I set out to. I wanted to create my interpretation of the Harakoni Warhawks. I wanted to evoke some of that Imperial armour vibe, but I really, really wanted these minis to look good at arm's length on the table, as well as good up close, but most importantly, when I began with them, you know, on a big cluttered kill team board. They needed to be able to stand out without looking gaudy, without the contrast levels being all over the shop. And I'm really, really satisfied actually with how they worked out. The melter gun with the stock on, I just think's amazing. It's exactly how I pictured doing the Warhawks, and it may have taken me 20 years, but at least I now have them, you know, on my shelf, which I'm really really, really happy about. I'm also pleased at how I feel the kits have blended together well. So essentially you've got the normal, as it were, Cadian kits. The demolitions expert, that head I think is off one of the artillery crew because he kind of had like bigger, I don't know, ear defender things on, which I thought would work quite well. But yeah, heads from them, bodies from the Kazakin, and then the arms and the backpacks from the Tempestus Aquilons or Science Aquilons miniatures. I think they blended together well. I think they look like a natural kit, which was important. But more important for me is that I don't think they look just like Kazakin with a different colour scheme on them, which was a concern I had going into the project. But yeah, Kill Team, I love it. I would really like to cover it more on the channel, if I'm honest. It's the way that I currently engage with the 40k setting. So if you guys are interested in seeing more Kill Teams, like pretty regularly, like one a month, let me know, because it's something I'd love to do. It's only really worthwhile if you guys actually want to watch that happen. So if you've got any questions about anything I've done in the video, pop it down in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks ever so much for all of your support. Take care, and I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com and maybe Ben can sort you out.